know it's been a while since I started the swap videos. Finally getting around to doing the final videos. Sorry it's a little dark in the garage. Garage door's got to be shut. Colorado decided to turn the winter yesterday, so I got to do it in here with what I got. Closed garage and some lights. The things I wanted to cover, some of the issues and problems that I ran into during this whole swap. One being the AC compressor, two being the AC lines, three is the engine mount cut, four being the trans mount, five the aluminum torque converter spacer, six the O2 sensor, seven the radiator, eight the radiator flow bottle, nine the radiator hoses, 10 extra parts that came with the kit, 11 being the front springs, I guess in relation to the front passenger side upper control mount in the oil filter space between the two, throttle body spacer, sort of, wiring harness, knock sensors, and the AC recharge cost. Not many know that this came with a new style refrigerant, and it's very expensive compared to the old stuff you could buy from O'Reilly's or whatever. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and get started. So the first thing I want to talk about is the AC compressor mounting bolt. Actually, it's the oil fill bolt on the top of the compressor. If you can see it down there, it's the button head bolt, a little rusty on the inside. I pretty much had to cut that complete nub off. And the reason I had to do that was because of the close relation of that part to the steering gearbox. Let me see if I could get down a little closer and show you what I'm talking about. So as you can see right there, I pretty much shaved the whole top of that nub off. I found another bolt that fit down in there, that button head bolt that you're looking at, and I put a little bit of sealant around it and put it back in. I got about 4,000 miles on it now. Not a piece of oil has come out of there, so it's obviously sealed up pretty good. There's other ways you could do it, but that was the way that I found. And the problem with this is the AC compressor for the truck engine is different than the one for the car engine. Mounts in a different position, and it doesn't have any problems interfering with this steering gearbox at all. So if you're using a truck engine, this is definitely something you're gonna have to look into, as this AC compressor is just in too close proximity to the steering gearbox. All right, the second thing I want to talk about is this AC line. The big one, as you can see further down in there, runs all the way up here and attaches right up here in front of the computer in the windshield washer fluid bottle. That hose is pretty easy to manipulate, kind of bend it around to get it to go down in there where I needed it to. The other line that runs to the AC condenser right there, this guy right here, that one runs down and attaches to the top of that. I manipulated this hose forever, kept messing with it, and every time I did it, it kept kinking. What I did was I actually removed the hose, flipped it around, so the mount that used to go to the condenser and the mount that used to go now goes to the AC compressor, and the one side that used to go to the AC compressor is now on the condenser side. And it was just the way that those mounting points were clocked. It actually lined it up pretty good, and as you can see, it's a nice sweeping bend from the condenser all the way down to the compressor. All right, the third thing I want to talk about is the engine mount. So this engine mount right here, welded to the frame, you have to notch that down. So you can see where the old bolt used to ride right here in this little circular pattern, and you have to notch it down 1 inch, and then you have to lob the top of the mount off to make clearance for this exhaust manifold right here. Now in the instructions, the only pictures you'll ever see are the front side of this mount, so the opposite side of what you're seeing right here, and it says to cut it down 1 inch. So what I did is I cut the front down 1 inch and I did not cut the back down 1 inch. And when we put the engine in, it was very quickly realized that we were supposed to notch the back as well, as the engine was sitting cockeyed in the engine bay. So we ended up having to pick the engine back up, and I ended up having to cut this rear part of this mount down while the engine was suspended up, and it didn't allow me for a lot of space You know, I managed to get it done using a Sawzall, cut off wheel, and whatever else I could cram up in this hole. But it would have been way easier to do it with the engine not in the engine bay like I did the front one. So ensure that you cut the front and the back of this mount down 1 inch. So the next thing I want to talk about is the transmission mount. I alluded to this in the last video with a picture and a brief description of what I did. So you saw the notches that were made on this metal bracket that's bolted to the transmission. This rubber isolator, so those studs that are sticking up, there's 3 of them. They are actually offset. So to gain a little bit more space, when I took this off, I flipped it around 180 degrees to put it back on, and that allowed the studs to be, you know, further the opposite direction than they were before. And then on top of that, this cross member right here, as in the last video, we notched it all the way back to this wall right here. So if you look at the pictures on the last video where it shows this cross member and the notches that I cut out, you'll see a faint black line from a marker, and that was me marking where this wall was at in relation to these mounting holes up here. So you can't come all the way as far back as you think you can, but with me notching this mount, flipping this rubber isolator around and notching this out, it gave me that like 1 inch of clearance I needed, that the transmission was going to come back because of the spacer between the engine and the transmission. So as you can see, I'll throw a picture in here in a minute of the aluminum spacer. So you have the spacer plate, and this is what is the transmission to engine adapter. Inside of here, there's another aluminum round spacer. You probably saw it in the unpacking video. And that spacer takes up this much space between the torque converter and the flywheel on the engine. Well, what ended up happening, like I said, I'll try to throw the pictures in here at the end, where the torque converter bolts, the flywheel bolts and that spacer interfere with each other. They make slight contact, and it took me starting it up and running it. I could hear like this clicking noise from underneath. I shut it back down. I pulled the transmission all the way out again, just to find out that the edge of the bolt, and not all the bolts, there happened to be 2 different bolts in here, which is kind of odd. Some were flush backed and some had these like little line ridges on them. And those line ridges were just enough to where it will barely tap. When this metal gets hot and starts expanding, it's just enough to where it makes this tapping noise. You only really hear it at idle. When I tore it back apart, you know, I saw what it was. I inspected everything, torque converter, all that stuff, and you know, everything looked good. The only thing that showed contact or any issue at all was the head of them bolts and that adapter where they'd been tapping together. There was no wear, no gouging, no anything. It was merely a tapping, and so I've just learned to live with it. I think maybe at some point in time I might tear this transmission back out and try some ARP flywheel bolts. They look like they have a little bit thinner of a head on them, and see if that stops that tapping noise. Been tapping together. There was no wear, no gouging, no anything. It was merely a tapping, and so I've just learned to live with it. I think maybe at some point in time I might tear this transmission back out and try some ARP flywheel bolts. They look like they have a little bit thinner of a head on them, and see if that stops that tapping noise. Talk about the radiator. It's small. It's for a V6. There was an option when I purchased this to purchase the radiator with it. There's an additional cost. I don't know how much. I chose not to. And the problem that I'm running into now is that the fan kicks on all the time. So every time you come to a stop, you know, you can watch the coolant, you know, temperature gauge in the off-road pages, and you can watch it climb up, and it hits like 112, the low side will kick on, 117, the high side of the fan kicks on, and everybody that has one of these Jeeps knows how loud that fan is at a red light. So I'll probably, some point in time, go ahead and purchase that bigger radiator that they offered. They told me with the 5.7 it wasn't really going to be that big of an issue. I shouldn't have any problems with it, but and it really doesn't. I mean, the fan obviously cools it back down, shuts back off, so on and so forth. But just stop and go traffic, that fan's running for a relatively long time. Just something to think about when you go to purchase this kit, if that annoys you. Another thing is for the truck engine, obviously where the water pump ports are different than the car engine. This kit was, designed partially specifically for a car engine. I chose to use a truck engine, as you know. I found one same year, came out of 2019 Dodge Ram. Actually a little like 200 less miles on it than the Jeep had on at that moment in time. So it was a good buy. I figured I'd deal with the problems as they came. One of the issues is when you buy this kit, if you tell them you're going to use a factory radiator, they give you these little reducer couplers right here. There's one on the top and one on the bottom. The one on the top wasn't really that bad, kind of fit pretty good, along with the radiator hose and everything that they had given me. The downfall was the lower radiator hose. I doubt you're going to be able to see too much of it down in there, if any at all. But I had to buy another hose just for a little 45-degree piece, along with the metal pipe that they give you and the reducer coupler to get it all together. It started leaking on me pretty much instantly. If you could see down in there, I have the hose clamp that came with the truck engine, and I bought a used engine, so it came with all the cut hoses and all that stuff on it. And I just went ahead and threw another hose clamp on it behind there, a regular worm clamp, and it stopped the leak altogether. So when you buy the radiator, I assume that they have the same size ports. I think it's 1.75 inches on top, 2 inches on the bottom, and obviously you can run regular hoses with it. The third thing to do with the cooling system is this lower hose underneath this overflow bottle. Let's see if I can get that one right there. So that thing started dripping pretty much as soon as I put coolant in to fill the cooling system back up. They were in back order for about a week, or no, it's about 2 weeks, I guess. It took me to get a new one in. I purchased a new one, and I just let that one drip till I purchased a new one. But surprisingly enough, here's the new one right here. It quit leaking. There's quite a bit of pressure inside that bottle. Whenever if you pull the cap off while it's still hot, it starts gurgling. It starts filling up with fluid straight at the radiator. It's got a lot of pressure. The only thing I could guess is that over time that ends up sucking that up further and causes a better seal and keeps it from leaking. But anyways, I kept this one just in case it started leaking again. It hasn't yet, like 4,000 miles into it. But this part, I believe, was somewhere around $60 for replacement, which is pretty high. But as you can see, has this little seal down in it with these little metal retaining clip on it. And so I guess just from the factory, it's not really tight enough. I started researching this, and apparently it's a pretty common problem in these, that the even people with a factory V6 haven't done anything to it, have a problem with that leaking sometimes. It was dripping straight down on top of that steering shaft right there for the steering wheel down to the gearbox, and that thing was completely full, completely wet. And of course underneath the Jeep right there was a little bit of drips on the floor, but it hasn't leaked a drop since, so I think we're good. So this is the oil filter housing. It comes off SRT engine. It's an additional parts list that they send you that you have to buy. This is one of the items. It kicks it like 45 degrees forward. What they're trying to do is to keep it from contacting this upper control arm mount right here. Originally I had no lift on this, and the front end was sagged pretty bad, obviously from the weight of the new engine versus the old engine. I did some research, found out that the new EcoDiesel coming in the Jeeps, the EcoDiesel that comes in the Jeeps weighs approximately the same as a Hemi does. So I ordered some factory springs for a JL with an Eco Diesel and put them in, and it was perfect. I mean, this thing was exactly where it was at before. Ride height wise on the front, it felt good. Drivability on the road, put about 1,000 miles on it that way. Mistake was I went camping, and the road taking me to the campsite was kind of rough. I wouldn't say it was off-road by any means, but it was definitely a rough dirt road. And driving through there, maybe a little bit too fast, who knows? But you can see where the upper control arm hit this oil filter adapter. Now, some people, after I did some research, said that you can actually cut this little drain pan that's on the bottom of this oil filter. As you can see, you cut that little drain pan off, and you know, obviously, it's going to give you a lot more space right there. I chose to leave it for now. I'll take it back off, maybe do it one day. But when it hit, the problem is that it started leaking oil. I thought I'd cracked it further up there, but after I pulled it off at the campsite, I realized that nothing was wrong with it. It wasn't cracked. All the seals were still intact, everything. I put it right back on, cleaned it up, put it back on, sealed it up, and it hasn't leaked a drop of oil since. But at some point in time, I'll probably still go ahead and cut that off to give me that a little bit additional clearance right there, and keep that from happening again. I'm sure if I flexed out hard enough right now, it'd probably still contact it again. But it's just something that I wanted to note. So if you're doing this job and you buy this adapter before you put it on and worry about it, you might think about trimming that little drain pan off the bottom of it, and then you should be good to go. All right, next I want to talk about the O2 sensor. One on the driver's side, let me see, driver's side upper O2 sensor. You can see where the bung is, where it used to be. So that was from the factory location. That's this exhaust kit that Dakota Custom shipped me. I put that in, and it was making contact with the transmission. I mean, it was just almost too close. I went to a exhaust shop, found an exhaust shop that sells these bungs for these O2 sensors. I drilled it out, I think 1 or 2 inches further down, welded in a new bung, put the new sensor in, and obviously I got plenty of clearance now, as you can see. I don't really know where the disconnect is with this. I don't know if that was just a mess up when they were, cutting the holes and welding the bungs for the O2 sensors on the exhaust, or I don't know if something has changed. I'd imagine if you did not use the factory transmission, if you used the 8HP 75 without this adapter between the engine and transmission, the transmission obviously bell housing was set a lot closer to the engine right now, and that O2 sensor probably would have cleared at that point in time. So maybe that's what this exhaust is designed around. I don't really know. Really didn't take me much to re-drop it back down, pull the O2 sensor out, welded a new bung, and then that same exhaust shop sold a plug for the O2 sensor port that you could plug that off. They did note that if you plug it off and this thing heats up, you'll probably never be able to get that back out of there. Something just seizes up in there. But I don't ever plan on taking it back out anyways. Now I'll talk about the NOx sensors. So this 2019 engine came with this style of NOx sensor on the side. One on the passenger side, one on the driver's side. As you can see, the little bitty plug on the back of it. The wiring harness that comes with the kit comes with a big old style square looking NOx sensor plug. Obviously didn't work. I could have one of two things, either bought an old style NOx sensors and put them in both sides of the engine, but because it was a used engine, it came with a complete wiring harness when it was shipped to me, so I already had the plug for these O2 sensors. So I cut them, soldered them, and sealed them. And then that just saved me a little bit of money. I mean, I already had all the parts here. If I didn't have the wiring harness, then I probably would have went and bought the old style NOx sensors and installed those on both sides of the engine. All right, as stated in the other video, I think one of the original ones when I talked about the differences between Hemis, the big difference is this alternator placement right here. So the alternator on a truck engine is up on top of the engine, and on a car engine, it's down in that hole right there, which is why I told you that the water pump and the ports for the whole coolant system are in a different part. They're a little bit further over on the timing cover than they are right here. So what happened was I used this intake manifold off of a Jeep Grand Cherokee because just like the picture in the last video of both intake manifolds sitting together, the truck one, obviously the throttle body faces upward and you don't have an abundant amount of space in here, apparently, as the truck engine does, to have a throttle body facing upward with the intake hose coming off of that. So I found this used. Some guy was selling it off of his Jeep Grand Cherokee. I bought it and put it on. Everything fits perfect. It was almost identical to the one that came on the truck engine, minus the placement of the throttle body. Well, what I learned is no matter which way you clock this throttle body to meet up with the 4 holes that are in the intake manifold for the throttle body, no matter which way you clock it, it does not go on. You're either going to interfere with the timing cover or you're going to interfere with the alternator, and there's no other way around it. I went to a local machine shop and I had him cut me this spacer, and it's the outer diameter is the outer diameter around these mounting holes from the throttle body, and the inner diameter of this is the size of the throttle body itself. I drilled it out, measured it, drilled it out, and I installed the 4 original throttle body screws, and then I clocked this throttle body the way that it would fit, and I marked it again, and then I drilled and tapped these holes right here and had bolts running into it. Issues, not at all. If you don't have a lot of skills in doing this, I would say the other option you have, which is really recommended by Dakota Customs, is to buy a new intake manifold from Edelbrock. Them run $900 to $1,000. What the Edelbrock intake manifold does is this throttle bodies actually sits a little bit higher, and then you don't have that interference that you do here with the timing cover. So the easier, more expensive option would be a intake manifold from Edelbrock, or you can, have a spacer made like this, and it cost me, I think, $30 to have this made at a machine shop. I just took the throttle body down there, told them I needed the outer diameter to be the outer diameter of all these, and the inner diameter to be the size of the inside of the throttle body. They made it for me in like a day. I went back and picked it up. Probably took me a few hours to, measure everything out, drill it out, tap it, all that stuff. But that's pretty much the 2 options with that. So we'll move into the wiring harness itself. So this kit was kind of I guess what I got was a partial kit for a car engine, partial kit for a truck engine. And I explained that to you by this intake right here, obviously for a truck engine because it's coming to the passenger side. The car engine one would go to the driver's side, just like a million pictures of Hemi swaps and Jeeps. Most of America's most wanted 4x4 ones. All car engines, they all come to the passenger side. This computer right here gets kicked sideways and mounted inside the little metal pan for the air filter. So with that being said, when I ran the wiring harness for this engine, I came up with a few plugs in the front that just didn't quite fit where they were supposed to go. So one being the alternator. Obviously on a car engine, when it's down in there, that plug needs to run up the passenger side of the harness, and that's exactly where it was. So I had to use that other harness that I had and extend that and run it underneath here to meet the alternator on that side. The throttle body plug, it didn't take any extension, but it did take a little bit of manipulating to get that where it needed to be. This air intake temperature sensor, that was another one that was on the driver's side of the harness, obviously, because most of the car, actually all the car intakes will go driver's side, not passenger. And the third one would be the coolant temp sense, which I don't know if we'll be able to see it, but it's down on this side. That ran up the driver's side harness, obviously because the water pump is more centered on the timing cover for the car engine. So that was able to run up there. Obviously that sensor goes to that side. Truck engine, obviously it's on this side. So that was another one. Those are the 3 plugs that I really had to figure out after running the harness that I didn't really know where they went to. So a few other things I need to talk about. I can't really show it. One being the extra parts that came with the kit. So I had an abundant amount of power steering hoses. I had a windshield washer fluid bottle. Other various bits and pieces that I can't think of right now, but those were the big things. The power steering hose that came with it, I noticed that on the invoice when he sent it to me, $223 or something like that. I questioned him about it. Do I even need that, considering I'm using a truck engine? The alternator's on top, not on the bottom. If the alternator's on the bottom, you'd have to move the electric power steering pump forward on the frame 2 inches. With the truck engine, you don't have to do that, obviously, because the alternator's not down there interfering with that electric power steering pump. I didn't really see the need. I had looked at it a million times, you know, everything looked like it was gonna be out of my way. And I just really didn't think that I was gonna need it. And so I questioned him, hey, do I even need these? He's like, oh yeah, definitely, you're gonna have to run it. You know, you're gonna have to reroute the lines in different directions. So I thought, okay, just sheer size, maybe the shape of the oil pan or something like that, you know, makes you run it a different direction. Truthfully, I did the whole engine swap, never even thought about this power steering system at all until I put it back together and was going through the parts that were left over and realized that all these power steering hoses are still in there that I paid over 200 bucks for. You know, I called him, I asked him about it, and he said that, you know, it's just another way of routing the power steering line. But if I didn't have to use it, not to worry about it. But the only thing that concerned me was the $200 that I spent on it. I'm not trying to nickel and dime anything. Obviously, this is an expensive project, but I just didn't see it was unnecessary for me to purchase that. I didn't need it. The power steering line that runs on the front of the cross member, right below the oil pan, is a plastic line. It's part line, part oil cooler, I guess. I guess because it's plastic, it cools the fluid as it's going through it. I could see that being easily damaged during the removal or installation of the engine. If that was the case, then I guess apparently those lines would come in real handy at that moment in time. But I didn't even touch the power steering lines. I had no issues with them, and everything works as it should. So I just didn't see the point in that. The overflow bottle, that's specific for a car engine. If the intake manifold, the intake went to driver's side instead of passenger side like it does in a truck engine, obviously that's right where the windshield washer fluid bottle is. When I noted earlier on the computer the computer moved to the inside of that little metal pan for the air filter. That's right where the windshield washer bottle fits, and he sends one that fits further back in the firewall, that little corner of the engine compartment, completely out of the way. Maybe it bolts right in, maybe it doesn't, I don't know. I didn't mess with it, I left it in the box, I didn't need it. I'm sure that was just part of the parts kit. I didn't see it, you know, billed as anything extra. The extra additional parts page, he went over with me, told me what I need, what I didn't need. I didn't need some things because it was a truck engine versus car engine. And so we went through, you know, line by line, and he annotated what I needed. One thing that was on there that I purchased that I didn't need was gaskets for the exhaust manifold. The ones that he shipped in his kit, when he shipped the exhaust manifolds to me, I opened the box, pulled them out. They had the gaskets already in there. They are quite pricey. I think $75 to $100 for those gaskets. So I was able to return those back to the Jeep dealership and get my money back on that. That oil filter adapter that I talked about. Note that there's 2 gaskets in there. There's a smaller inner gasket, and then there's a big outer O-ring style gasket. It sounds kind of dumb, but I put it all together. Everything was ready to fire it up. Went ahead and fired it up for the first time, and you know, just for a few seconds, shut it right back down. Got out. Obviously, there's oil all over the floor. It was coming straight out of that oil filter adapter. I pulled that back off just to realize that I had not ordered the outer ring for it. Not realizing that there was 2 completely different O-ring gaskets that go inside that adapter. Once I went down, like I told you, it came off of some old like 6.1 liter SRT engine. So when I went down to the parts department, it was not something they had in stock. They had to order it. It probably took 3 or 4 days to come in. So that was like a stopping point before I could come back and fire back up again. That was kind of detrimental on the timeline because I was definitely had been waiting for a long time, which leads me to my next point is the shipping times. So Dakota Customs told me from the time that I order it, it will be shipped up within 7 days of the time that they get the money. So I purchased the kit, paid them for it. It took them 11 days, I believe, to actually ship the kit to me. And everything was lined up. I had ordered an engine already, had the engine here. I put in vacation from work for a week so that I'd have that time to do the swap. And it got to the day before my vacation started that the kit finally arrived here, and I was starting to get a little bit worried about it because it was on a weekend. And if that didn't come in, that would put me, a whole weekend behind when I had only taken a week of vacation. So allow yourself a little extra time. I'm sure they get busy at times. Probably not their fault. The kit came in very well packaged. They obviously took their time packing it and everything like that. But just something to note: add yourself a little bit of extra time when you order this. My reasoning trying to get everything lined up perfectly is because you have to ship the computer for the Jeep back to them to get the software installed in the computer. I was hoping to get that back, before my vacation ran up, so I could go ahead and get everything started, make sure everything's working. So all my timelines were very close together. I tried to get everything, very close. That way everything would work. Leads me to another point about the computer shipping. So as advertised, you overnight it to them. They take 48 hours to do it, and they overnight it back to you. So I was going to overnight it out on a Saturday, but I was scared it was going to get there on Sunday. And knowing shipping companies and everything now, I just didn't want them throwing the computer to my Jeep out on their doorstep, and then they're not going to come back to work till Monday morning to get it off the doorstep. So I chose to wait till Monday to ship it out. Ship it on a Monday, overnight it. I figured Tuesday they would get it, Wednesday, Thursday work on it, overnight it back to me, and I would have it Friday or Saturday. Well, when I took it in on Monday, I realized that Black Hawk, South Dakota does not allow for an overnight. Doesn't matter where you're at, they don't allow for an overnight to them because it's just in a rural style area. It takes 2 days. That's the fastest you can get it to them. So I'm tell you that put me way behind on my timeline. So now they didn't even get the computer until Wednesday. Then they take their 48 hours to do it, which was Thursday, Friday. They didn't ship it on Saturday. They didn't ship it out, I think, till the following Monday, which got it to me on Tuesday. So allow yourself for plenty of time to get them the computer. If it was me doing it all over again, I would have overnighted to them on Saturday, or two-day to them on Saturday. They would have got it on Monday, worked on it Monday, Tuesday, or Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, depending. Overnighted back to me. I probably would have had it prior to that weekend. That was kind of my screw up or just an unknown thing. So I didn't get it till the following week. Then I started it, the oil leak happened, then I had to wait another 3 or 4 days, and it wasn't until that following weekend that I was actually finally able to fire it up and start it and let it run for the first time, like really good, as you saw in the last video. The last thing I want to talk about is the AC recharge costs. So this is a new type of refrigerant in there. It's I don't know, there's some random alphanumerical code that goes along with it, but it's very expensive. Approximately $400 to have the AC system refilled. At that point in time, you got to hope that you don't have a leak somewhere or anything like that. When I did the AC, I replaced every single one of the AC green O-rings and all the lines and everything to ensure that I would get the best end product that I could before I took it down to get it recharged, because the price was so much that I didn't want to have to pay for it twice. I got this whole kit and everything with the kit. The engine cost me just under $3,000 used. That was for the engine and being shipped to me from Florida. The kit cost me $10,200. I've recently seen that he's went up in his price online to $11,500, I think. So he went up $1,500 on his kit from when I purchased it. So at my price at $10,200 plus the engine at about $3,000, and then any estimated costs that go on with that, oils, fluids, you know, O-rings for the AC system, all that suspension, everything. I would estimate it cost me between 14,000 and 14,500, which is probably the cheapest. That's obviously me doing all the work. That's the cheapest I think that you can probably do it for, and obviously it's going to cost you about $1,500 more than that now because the kit has went up in price. The last thing that I want to talk about is the software programming for the Jeep. So everything runs fine. Don't get me wrong, it runs great. I have no complaints, except my backup sensors do not work. It's somehow still storing the code in there. The way it works is this computer has the software to run the V8, obviously, and it's sending bad data to the body control module. Well, Dakota Customs uses the Z Automotive Taser, JL Taser Mini or whatever, as a link between the two pieces that fools the computer into thinking that there's no check engine lights, there's nothing wrong. Well, somehow on the 18 and 19 Jeeps specifically, as what Z Automotive's telling me, they there's just some issue in there, and it doesn't you know, fool the computer for all the code. So there's still some random code in there. It doesn't throw a check engine light or anything, but there is a random code somewhere in there that the Jeep is seeing, and because it's seeing it, it puts the backup sensors into default. And because there's a code in there, the remote start does not work. So you start it up, it'll run for like 3 or 4 seconds, and it shuts itself off, almost like if you try to remote start with low fuel. It does the same exact thing. Z Automotive right now is trying to develop a fix for it. I'm in communication with them about, you know, once every few weeks or something. They push out updates. All the Taser updates have to come straight from Dakota Customs. You can't use the regular ones off of their website, obviously, because it's got special programming in there to help the computer think that it's doing everything properly. So every update that you have for the Taser after that can't just come straight from Z Automotive. It has to come from Dakota Customs. They pushed me an update already once. I updated the Taser, put it back in. Everything, you know, ran just like it should, except for the backup sensors still don't work. But that's something that they're gonna have to work on for a little while. So if you have an 18 or 19 JL with backup sensors, just note that when you do this kit, may or may not work. Mine doesn't. So I think that's pretty much it. If y'all have any questions, leave them below. I'll try to answer them. Follow me on Instagram. That's JL_JeepLife. You can ask me any questions on there. If you're in the middle of the project and you got a question or something like that, please feel free to reach out to me. I'll try to help you through the problem or try to remember. I'm sure there's something on here that I missed in this video that I had to manipulate or work with one way or the other to get it, you know, to get it to work correctly. So anyways, thanks for watching.